West Texas, July 1944. The kitchen window framed a horizon so wide it felt like standing at the edge of the world. A German woman stood at the stove, hands trembling as she cracked eggs into a cast-iron skillet. Margaret Brennan, the rancher's wife, handed her an apron without ceremony. "You'll be staying in the room upstairs," she said. The woman nodded, unable to speak. She had been told Americans were brutal. She had been told wrong. Before we continue, if you're finding this story as fascinating as we do, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on untold World War II stories. Drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community around the world. Your support helps us bring these forgotten chapters of history to light. Outside, barbed wire was nowhere to be seen. Just cattle grazing under endless sky. Just freedom that felt more terrifying than any prison cell. These women had crossed an ocean as enemies of the state. Within months, they would be baking bread in American kitchens, teaching children to speak German, eating Sunday dinner with families whose sons were dying in Europe. And when the War Department discovered what was happening on these isolated ranches, they would face a choice between regulations and something far more dangerous, the possibility that enemies could become human. The war had reached Texas in ways no strategist had predicted, not with bombs or beaches, but with trains carrying women whose faces bore the weariness of a collapsing continent. Camp Hearne, southeast of Dallas, held over 4,000 German prisoners by late 1943. Most were men Afrika Korps veterans captured in Tunisia, Wehrmacht soldiers taken in Sicily and Italy, but several dozen were women. Nurses who had treated wounded in field hospitals, radio operators who had transmitted coded messages across North African deserts, clerks who had filed paperwork for a regime that was running out of paper, out of hope, out of time. The Geneva Convention required humane treatment. What it didn't account for was the American labor shortage so desperate that ranchers began asking questions the War Department didn't want to answer. Pearl Harbor had pulled the young men overseas. Their fathers, too old for combat, worked themselves into exhaustion trying to manage ranches that stretched for miles. Cattle needed tending. Fences needed mending. Cotton needed harvesting. The land didn't care about ideology or national loyalty. It demanded work, and there weren't enough hands to provide it. Then came the proposal, quiet, unofficial. Rancher John Brennan requested permission for female prisoners to work his property under supervision. 3 weeks later came cautious approval with pages of conditions: daylight work only, separate housing, daily inspections, no fraternization, no gifts, no personal ties. None of those rules survived contact with Texas hospitality. The first group arrived on a blazing morning, dust rising off the road to Brennan's ranch. 5 women stepped from a military truck, ages 19 to 34, in heavy Wehrmacht uniforms. They looked exhausted and wary. Propaganda had warned them Americans tortured prisoners. Margaret Brennan stepped off the porch, wiping flour from her hands. "They speak English?" she asked Corporal Davis. "Some," he said. "All right then," she said. "You girls hungry?" The women hesitated. Elsa Schmidt, a nurse from Hamburg, translated softly. Hunger was familiar. Kindness was not. "Yes," Elsa said. "We are hungry." "Good," Margaret said. "Breakfast's getting cold." Inside, the kitchen smelled of bacon, biscuits, and coffee. The women sat at a long wooden table staring at plates piled higher than any meal they'd seen in years. John Brennan sat at the head, his face unreadable. "Grace," he said simply. They bowed their heads, not from faith, but from civility. Then they ate slowly, then hungrily. Margaret refilled plates without asking. The only sound was forks on porcelain and the distant lowing of cattle. In that Texas kitchen, something in them began to change. When it was over, Elsa set down her napkin and spoke carefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. We did not expect this." "Expect what?" "Kindness. Margaret paused, meeting the younger woman's eyes. "Well, you're here now. War's over there, not here. You'll work hard. We'll treat you fair. That's the deal." That night, Elsa sat on her bunk in the small outbuilding behind the main house and wrote in a diary she had hidden from camp inspections. "Today, I felt human again. I don't know what to do with that feeling." The work began at dawn the next morning. At first, the tasks were simple: cleaning, cooking, mending fences. The women moved with military efficiency, years of discipline making them reliable even in unfamiliar labor. But something unexpected happened. The Brennans talked to them, not orders conversation. John explained the difference between Herefords and Longhorns while they mucked stalls. Margaret taught them to make biscuits from scratch, laughing when the dough came out too sticky. "Takes practice," she said. "Lord knows I burned plenty before I got it right." By the end of the first week, formality began cracking. The youngest prisoner, Anna Weiss, 19, and terrified of horses, stood frozen at the corral while a mare named Copper snorted nearby. John walked over slowly. "She won't bite," he said, holding out a sugar cube. "Let her smell you first." Anna's hand shook. The mare's nose was soft as velvet. The sugar disappeared. Anna laughed, a sound so unexpected it startled even her. "In Berlin, I never saw a horse up close." "Well," John said, "you're a long way from Berlin now." That night, Corporal Davis stopped by for his daily inspection. He found the women on the porch shelling peas alongside Margaret, talking about recipes and weather. He filed his report. All prisoners accounted for. No issues. What he didn't write was how normal it looked, how human. By midsummer of 1944, the arrangement had spread. Other ranchers requested workers. The War Department, quietly desperate to maintain agricultural output, approved more placements. Within months, over 30 German women were living on ranches across central Texas. The rules remained the same on paper. In practice, they dissolved like sugar in coffee. At the Henderson Ranch near Fredericksburg, a woman named Greta Hoffman discovered she had a gift for horses. Back in Germany, she had worked in a factory making radio parts. Here, she spent mornings training colts, her voice low and steady, hands gentle but firm. The ranch foreman, an older man named Carl, who had lost his son at Normandy, watched her work with something like wonder. "You got away with them," he said one afternoon. "My grandfather bred horses," Greta replied in halting English. "Before the war. Before everything." Carl nodded. He didn't ask about before. Everyone had a before that hurt to remember. The women learned the rhythms of ranch life. Early mornings when fog hung low over fields. Midday heat that made breathing feel like work. Evenings when the sky turned colors that had no names, orange bleeding into purple, bleeding into dark. They learned to rope, to ride, to read weather in the way clouds formed. Some discovered they were better at this life than the one they had left behind. But the transformation wasn't one-sided. The ranch families changed too. Margaret Brennan had lost a nephew at Anzio. When the war started, she had imagined Germans as monsters, faceless, cruel, inhuman. Then Elsa showed her photographs of her family in Hamburg. 2 sisters and a mother, all killed in an RAF bombing raid. Margaret held the pictures, seeing faces that could have been anyone's family, could have been hers. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "War makes everyone sorry," Elsa said. "That's all it does." The realization spread quietly through the community. At church socials, ranch wives mentioned the German women who worked their land. At first, the conversations were guarded, defensive. They're hard workers. They follow orders. But gradually the language shifted. Greta fixed the windmill yesterday. Anna makes the best apple strudel I've ever tasted. They stopped being prisoners and started being people with names, skills, stories. Not everyone approved. In town, there were whispers. Men who had fought overseas bristled at the idea of enemy women living comfortably while their buddies died in France. A minister in San Antonio gave a sermon condemning the fraternization, calling it a betrayal of soldiers bleeding in European mud. Letters reached military headquarters demanding an end to the program. But the ranchers pushed back. At a town meeting in July, John Brennan stood before his neighbors and spoke plainly. "I needed help. Government sent help. These women work harder than any hands I've hired in 30 years. They don't complain. They don't steal. They don't cause trouble. Far as I'm concerned, they've earned their place here." An older veteran missing his left arm from the First War stood up. "They're Nazis, John." "Maybe they were," John said. "But they're not now. You talk to them, you'll see. They're as sick of Hitler as we are." In the bunkhouses, the women spoke of Germany with grief and anger. They had believed in the fatherland, in victory, in Goebbels' lies until defeats, bombs, and hunger revealed everything was ash. Anna confessed to Margaret she'd joined the Girls' League at 14. "We sang songs about the Führer. I was a child. I didn't know." "None of us do," Margaret said. "What matters is what you do when you learn better." Letters from home described ruins and starvation. In Texas, there was food, clear skies, no sirens. The comfort brought guilt and relief. Elsa wrote, "I should hate it here, but I wake to birdsong, eat well, sleep without fear. What does it say that I'm happier here than in the fatherland?" That summer, Widow Ruth Morrison invited Greta to Sunday dinner. After reading a bedtime story to Ruth's daughter, Greta wept quietly on the porch. "For the first time in years," she said, "I'm all right. Eating meals with families, sleeping in ranch houses instead of segregated quarters." One woman, a former school teacher named Liesl Bauer, was tutoring a rancher's children in mathematics and geography. The report reached a colonel named Harold Jenkins, who had seen combat in the Pacific and carried the kind of anger that never quite healed. He read the accounts with mounting fury. "These are enemy nationals," he said to his staff. "Not guests, not employees, prisoners of war." An emergency order was drafted. All female POWs working on ranches were to be returned to Camp Hearne immediately. No exceptions. The program was to be terminated. The ranchers reprimanded. The prisoners disciplined. The order was scheduled to take effect November 1st. But someone leaked the decision. Word spread fast through the tight-knit ranching community. When John Brennan heard, he drove straight to the nearest military office, walked past secretaries trying to stop him, and demanded to see whoever was in charge. He found a captain named Miller, younger than Brennan's son would have been, shuffling papers with bureaucratic efficiency. "You're shutting us down," Brennan said. Not a question. Miller looked up, startled. "Sir, I can't discuss ongoing military decisions. I've got 5 women on my property who've worked harder than any hands I've ever hired. They fixed fences, tended cattle, helped bring in the harvest. They've caused 0 trouble. 0. And now you're telling me they're going back to a camp because someone in Washington got their feelings hurt? Mr. Brennan, I understand your frustration, but the Geneva Convention requires. I know what it requires. I also know we needed workers and the government couldn't provide them. So they sent prisoners. Now you want to take them back because they're too good at the job? Because we treated them like people instead of animals?" Miller set down his pen. "It's not that simple." "It never is," Brennan said. "But here's what I know. Those women are more American now than they ever were German. They've seen what freedom looks like. Real freedom, not the Nazi version. You send them back to wire fences and guard towers, you're just proving Hitler right about us." The argument didn't work. Bureaucracy had its own momentum. But Brennan wasn't alone. Other ranchers made calls, wrote letters, contacted congressmen. They argued economics, labor shortages, agricultural necessity. But beneath the practical arguments was something simpler. They didn't want to send the women back because they had stopped thinking of them as enemies. In the bunkhouses, the women packed their few belongings with quiet resignation. They had known this couldn't last. Anna folded the apron Margaret had given her. Greta wrote a letter to Ruth Morrison thanking her for Sunday dinners. Elsa stared out the window, trying to memorize the Texas sunset. Margaret found Elsa alone. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "You gave us months of kindness," Elsa replied. "That's more than we deserved." "Everyone deserves kindness," Margaret said. "War makes us forget that." The night before departure, over 40 ranchers arrived at Camp Hearne demanding a meeting with Major Wallace. "Gentlemen," he began, "my orders come from—" "Men who never set foot in Texas," John Brennan interrupted. "And what is happening?" Wallace asked. Ruth Morrison answered softly. "We're winning with tanks and bombs, but we're winning another war too, the one that matters after. Those women came here hating us. Now they don't. That's worth something." Wallace had seen the change himself, the letters from ruined Germany, the fading Nazi rhetoric, the gratitude replacing bitterness. "I'll make a call," he said. Days passed. November became December. Then new orders arrived. The women could stay on the ranches under stricter oversight. "Why?" Elsa asked. "Because someone realized peace starts before war ends," Wallace said. "Maybe defeating Nazism means remembering how to see each other as human." Spring 1945 brought grim news: Berlin fallen, Hitler dead, Germany surrendering. The women listened in silence, feeling relief, grief, and shame. Camp Hearne began repatriations. Men lined up to go home. The women hesitated. Return to what? Hamburg in ruins, families scattered. In Texas, the work continued. "War's over, but the work isn't," Brennan told Elsa. "You want to stay, you've got a place, with pay." Across dozens of ranches, similar offers were made. Some accepted, others agonized. Anna's aunt in Bavaria wrote back, "Stay in America if you can. There is nothing here but ghosts." By late 1945, over 20 women secured agricultural visas. Others returned out of duty. Farewells were hard. "You taught me to make biscuits," Elsa said. "You taught me that enemies are just people we haven't met yet," Margaret replied. Greta stayed, marrying Carl in a quiet ranch wedding: wildflowers, barbecue, fiddle music, and no talk of uniforms or countries. Just two people starting over. Anna remained too, taking a job as a teacher in a small school outside Austin. Her English improved rapidly. She became known for patience, for explaining mathematics in ways that made sense, for telling stories about faraway places. Years later, students would remember her fondness for German fairy tales, though she never spoke of the war unless directly asked. Liesel Bauer, a former schoolteacher, opened a bakery in Fredericksburg, a town founded by German immigrants a century earlier. The connection felt right, circular. Her strudel became famous. She never married but taught dozens of young women to bake, passing on recipes her grandmother had taught her. By 1946, the last POW camps in Texas closed. The towers came down, the wire rolled up, the barracks emptied. Where thousands of prisoners had once lived, only grass and memory remained. But the women who had stayed were everywhere, working ranches, teaching, running small businesses, building lives from the wreckage of war. They wrote letters to Germany encouraging legal immigration. Some relatives followed, forming small, integrated German communities. They attended Baptist churches and 4th of July celebrations, spoke English with thick accents, and brought schnitzel to church potlucks beside fried chicken and potato salad. The transformation was quiet but profound. In 1943, these women had been enemies. By 1946, they were neighbors through shared work and meals, through kindness repeated until it became habit, through the realization that nationality mattered less than character. Elsa returned to Germany in 1947 to help rebuild Hamburg. Before leaving, she gave Margaret her diary. "Keep this," she said. "Remember that people can change, that forgiveness is possible, that the future doesn't have to look like the past." Margaret kept it for decades. When she died in 1978, Her daughter donated it to a historical society. Rediscovered in the 1990s, Elsa's words became a vital record of how enemies became friends and how propaganda dissolved in lived experience. The women rarely spoke about their imprisonment. Anna gave one interview in 1982. Asked if she resented losing years of her life, she said, "I was angry once, but the war destroyed my country. If I'd stayed in Berlin, I might have died. Instead, I was sent to Texas, where I learned English, discovered I could teach, and was given a second chance. The war took everything from millions. It gave me a future. How can I resent that?" For decades, their story remained unknown. Records were classified, letters lost, memories buried. But historians later pieced it together. About 300 women across multiple states, mostly in Texas. Elsa's diary, survivor interviews, and declassified documents revealed how belief in Nazi lies crumbled when faced with kindness. They learned Americans weren't monsters, that propaganda had been just that. They also learned what freedom meant, not conformity wrapped in flags, but messy, argumentative decency, where even enemies were treated with humanity. The ranchers learned, too, that kindness didn't betray patriotism, that peace required bridge building, not just silence after guns stopped. Liesel's bakery thrived until 1989. Greta and Carl's marriage lasted 46 years. Their ranch still runs, their wedding photo from 1945 a symbol of hope surviving horror. Anna taught for 38 years, telling her students, "You're here now, that's what matters." The last of the women, Anna Weiss, died in 2004. At her funeral, students spoke of her patience and warmth. One said, "She told me the worst thing about war was how it made everyone forget how to see each other. But Texas taught her to remember." The war ended in 1945, but peace was built later in kitchens and classrooms, in the simple act of one woman handing another an apron and saying, "You'll be staying in the room upstairs."